We're going to start standing pose. So I'm going to have the feet sort of wider than my hips and turn the toes out just a fraction as well. I'm going to let myself settle a little bit. So just kind of shake out the hips, get that lower back working, and shake out the arms a little bit as well. And then we'll let ourselves settle. I'm going to take a little bit of a bend in the knees. So just a little bit, not a great deal, a couple of inches. And then bring the hands out in front so the palms are facing up. I'm going to inhale and bring the hands up towards the chest, the elbows are out wide. And on the exhale, I'm going to press everything back down. I'm going to keep the legs where they were. Inhale up. And exhale down. And inhale up. And exhaling down. So there should be a sense of grounding and connection with the floor as you press back down. Exhaling, the legs are still working. Feet are pressing into the floor evenly. Spine is long. And then we'll let ourselves stand back up. We'll zigzag the toes in this time. So a little gap for the heels. Take the hands out to the side and up towards the sky on the breath in. And exhale, take the hands out wide again. Just going to let their hands cross over. Inhale up. And on the exhale, let's see if we can cross the arms over the opposite way this time, which might mean that you might not have realized you needed to remember. So it might be from now on. Palms reaching together. Crossing the arms over. And then we're going to lift up onto the tiptoes. Come down onto the heels. Cross the arms over. Inhale up onto the tiptoes. Bring it back down, cross over the opposite way. Lifting up onto tiptoes. Exhaling down. Just a few more. And we'll take that as the last time coming down. Just bring the hands back out to the side of the body. Shake out a little bit. Going to take a very small back bend. So I'm going to have the feet about hip distance apart and parallel. I'm going to take the hands up towards the sky. Now, as you do that, you tend to sort of lift and arch into the upper back as the ribs come up. So I'm going to try and draw the ribs down towards the hips a little bit and draw the belly into the spine and see if you can send your hips towards the back of the mat. Then you're going to lift up through the chest and start to take a very tiny little back bend and see if you can squeeze the shoulder blades together a little bit. Pressing down into the floor, hips back, then through the spine. And then we'll let the hands come down and bring ourselves back into standing pose. So bring the hands in towards the heart as we breathe in. And exhale slowly over and down to the floor, just touching the toes. Hands onto the shins, lift up. Exhale down. Coming back up. And exhaling down. Now we're going to sit into a bit of a squat. Take the hands forwards and just let ourselves lift up slowly. As we bring the hands in towards the heart, we're going to zigzag the toes back together again and then soften the knees over the toes and sit back into that chair. I'm going to take that into a slightly revolved version. So I'm going to take my left hand over to my right thigh and place the right hand on the base of the spine. So turn the shoulders gently in the chest, but keep the hips and the knees pointing forwards. Now bring ourselves back into the center and cross over to the second side. And come back into the center, take a little breath, let us all stand up. Take feet out about hip distance apart again. Inhale those hands high. Through the heart and exhale down to the floor. Come off to the shins again to lift up. Fold. Hands on the shins to lift up. Folding down. Hands on the shins to lift. And folding down for final time. Again, we'll squat down. Take the hands forwards. And then drive through the legs to lift up. We'll just take the hands out wide and shake it all back out again. So shaking legs and arms. And then we'll settle. Take the hands to the sky again and into that forward fold, where we'll step back into our down dog. So just taking one leg at a time back gently and kind of exploring down dog to find out how it feels. So sometimes we want the feet a little closer, sometimes a little further away. Ideally, the feet would be hip distance apart and the heels hiding behind the ankles. You can pedal the legs out if that feels good, or you can be still. You can have a nice big juicy bend in the knees and work a little bit more into the upper back and the shoulders. Pressing the hands down into the ground. And we'll come forwards into a plank and just lower the knees down to the floor directly underneath. So hands are underneath the shoulders, ready for cat-cow. Draw the chest forwards. Tuck the tailbone, let the spine round out. Press into the hands. Inhale forwards. And exhaling out. And just working gently through a few rounds. See how the spine feels. And then we're going to take it into some barrel rolls. So we'll just roll out to the side with ribs. Get a little bit more movement through the hips as they sway from side to side. Allow ourselves to bend the elbows so you can feel the shoulder blades moving around a little bit more freely over the surface of the ribs. Now the head to move as well. We'll take it in both directions. Just a couple more breaths. And then back into that neutral position. I'm going to take the knees wide and sit back into a child's pose. So we're going to sit onto the heels. You can use blocks underneath the back of the thighs if the knees are a little bit sore. And try and lengthen the hands out. So elbows are off the ground. Allow yourself to sink through the gap between the thighs. And then we're going to take the hands and gently walk them over to the right side. Walk the left hand out an inch or so further forwards, or as much as you can. Walk it out. I'm going to guess that's an inch. It felt like an inch. And you lift the head slowly so you can look towards the hands and then walk them across to the other side. And again, just walk out that right hand, just inch it out a little bit. You should feel a really big stretch down the side of the body through the armpit. That stretchy feeling will obviously increase as you breathe in. Try and keep the breath smooth and even. Last breath in. And then look towards the hands. Bring the hands back into the front of the mat. Lift up again onto all fours. Bring the knees directly underneath the hips. So we're going to take some side planks, but they're going to be some baby ones. Don't mean that in a derogatory way, but it's just sort of like an easy version. So we're going to pivot the left foot out to the side and just bring the left hand in a little bit closer to the center line. Tuck the toes of the right foot underneath and lengthen out, and then drop the heel onto the floor. So the sole of the foot on the back leg is there. Let's slowly turn the body to the right and take the hand up towards the sky. Now you want to make sure that your shoulder is over your hand rather than your hand being a long way forwards. You're trying to get some lift through these obliques. So you're going to try and lift your hips up towards the sky and press the long leg down into the floor. So you're starting to take a little bit of weight out of that bottom bent knee. So it's just a little bit easier from balance point of view. Everything else turns on exactly the same. And then we'll bring the hands down to the floor and we'll switch it over to the other side. So come back into the tabletop position, just reset the hands. Pivot your right foot out, bring the right hand in a bit. Tuck the toes on the left foot, take it out so the sole of the foot's to the floor. Hips press over to the left a little bit as you lift up. Try and lift that little bit of weight out of the knee so you can really sort of feel yourself pushing down through the arm, pushing away from the floor rather than just trying to hold yourself up. It's a very subtly different feeling. Both of them are strong. Both of them will make you breathe hard. and then we'll come back down. So again, we'll come back into that tabletop position, and we're going to take something called a fire hydrant. It's a static pose. So the first thing we need to be focusing on is that we've got front hip bones, these guys that just sit above the waist on band on our trousers. So you're going to try and keep those the same distance from the floor and tabletop. Now you're going to tuck the toes of your right foot underneath very gently. Fractionally lift the knee off the ground. Then you're going to take the knee out to the side. So you've got this 90-degree bend. And you're trying to keep those front hip bones the same height. And you want to have the knee and the heel roughly the same height from the floor. Now you might get to 90 degrees, or you might be a lot less. But we're trying to get the extension in the leg rather than rotating the pelvis round. So we're using our core muscles to keep the hips stable. And it's quite a long hold. Ooh, and then we bring the foot back down. Take a little breath. And then take it out to the second side. So we tuck the toes underneath. Get that little bit of a lift of the knee, just a fraction. You can already feel the arms and the body working a lot harder at that point. And then take the leg out to the side, just cocking the leg out. Try and keep both arms pressing down into the floor so you don't bend into the elbows. Get those outer hip muscles working. Take a last breath and bring the knee in. I'm only giggling because I just find that tremendously hard. So tuck the toes underneath. We'll move into down dog. Or I'll just stretch the legs out a little bit. So that will open out the hips again for us. You can walk them out if you need to. It's interesting how effective it is finding some muscles in the hips that you didn't actually know you had. I want to take a scissor dog. So I'm going to take the right leg to the sky, come up onto the tippy toe, and put the leg up towards the ceiling. Now you want to be careful that you don't lean forwards into your shoulders at this point. So you push the hands down into the floor and push back a little bit more. And then we'll hinge the leg back down to the floor and take it across to the other side. So just inhaling out. Two straight legs, two straight arms, last breath, and hinging from the hips, the foot comes to the floor, and come back into plank, and then you're going to start to walk the toes in, so they're just going to inch towards the front of the mat. Now as you do that, your hips will start to lift up towards the sky. Just one leg at a time, just inching in a little bit. Now, at some point, this is where it's very difficult to breathe or move. And at that point, you start to just lift the feet off the ground, come up onto the fingertips, and bring yourself into the front of the mat, into that forward fold. Bring the hands onto the hips for the last time to inhale up, soften the knees. Inhale high, bring the hands in towards the heart. We'll exhale down to the floor, but we'll take the hands forwards a foot or so. Lift the heels off the ground, bend the knees, and just sit down onto their haunches. Get the hands behind, and just let the bottom come down to the floor. So we're going to work on the core a little bit. We use the hands to help roll us down to the ground. And just wriggle out the hips a little bit on the shoulders. And then allow the knees to come in towards the body. You get a sense of the lower back sinking into the floor. Now, draw the belly down to the spine to keep that lower back into the ground as you extend your toes up towards the sky, directly above your hips. You're going to take the hands out above the chest. You're going to alternate the arms and the legs. So you're going to take a little breath, and on the exhale, you're going to let that right arm and left leg Descend. We don't quite touch the floor. We lift back up. And then we cross over to the other side. Now try and keep both legs straight and move slowly with your breath from side to side. There is a certain amount of rhythm. If you try to think about moving the arms and the legs, you tend to lose the pattern of the movement, and it gets a little bit more complicated on the poor old brain. So once you've taken several rounds, just see if you can feel it rather than think it. It's a little bit like driving the car. When you're learning, there's so much to sort of take in, so many senses being used. But gradually you get to the point where you can drive, and you can actually listen to the radio or talk to the person if there's someone next to you. Okay, going to take the knees back in towards the body. Just have a little bit of a rest there for a moment. Wriggle out the hips a little bit from side to side. We're going to do pretty much the same thing again, except we're just going to take the legs halfway down and we're going to keep them together. Now, if you have a brick or a block handy, you can put that between the thighs. It doesn't have to be, a big block or a thin block. It doesn't really matter. It just gives you something to focus on to bring the thighs together. And we're going to lengthen the legs up towards the sky. And then bring the hands down by the side of the body. Really wrap them in close towards the sides, palms facing down, and press into the shoulders a little bit and the arms and the lower back into the floor. So the legs are still lengthening out, toes are pointing away. We come down halfway slowly as we exhale. Now generally, when your legs or your toes just start to leave your peripheral vision, you've gone far enough, and then you slowly draw them back up. Be conscious that you don't draw the knee feet too close towards the head and start to pull the tailbone away from the floor. So as you come back up, you want to keep your lower back into the ground, keep the tailbone on the floor. As soon as you start to feel it to rise, then you're going to stop and start to move out in the opposite direction. Now again, if you do this quickly, kind of lose the attachment and the finesse of the detail of keeping the spine flat to the floor. And if you're wondering, my legs are trembling as well. In fact, most of my body is. Last time coming up. And then we can bend the knees and take the block out. That feels good. And we'll just draw the knees in towards the chest again. A little rock from side to side, maybe a little bit of a hip circle thing going on. And then bring the thighs together again. Bring the hands back into that same position. Draw the belly down, lower back into the floor. Extend the legs up. And then it's just one leg at a time. So we'll take the right leg out and down. Inhale it back up. Exhale the left. And bring it back up. Over to the right. Lifting it up. To the left. Bring that up. To the right. To the left. Try and keep those legs straight. Final time to the right. Final time to the left. And then we'll draw knees back in. Again, we'll take that little bit of a hip circling rotation or a gentle hug, just to very gently stretch out the back muscles, get them away from sort of holding on so tight as they were to help us in the pose. We want to get them moving again slowly, but not overstretching them. A roll on to whichever side you like to lift on. As you exhale, come back up to sitting. Now I'm going to just draw the heels in, roll over the shins, so onto the front of the mat again. Take a little breath, tuck the toes underneath. It's kind of a down dog situation. Walk the fingers into the toes. Nice off the hand. I'm going to try and keep the weight even between the front and the back of the foot. Nice broad shoulders, crown of the head just dropped. Press into the floor, let the hips lift a little bit more. And then we'll bring your hands onto the hips, soft knees, just squeeze the shoulders together a little bit as we lift up. And shake it all out. Shake out the legs, shake out the arms. See how everything feels. I'm going to bring the feet about 2 inches apart. Hands into the heart, just soften the knees over the toes. I sit down deep into that chair. Extend the hands out in front of the shoulders as I breathe in. And exhale in position. Squeezing the thighs together a little bit. Try and open the shoulders out a little bit to the side. 2 more breaths. And bring the hands in towards the heart. Exhale forwards into the forward fold. And we're going to step back into our down dog. Now from the down dog, we'll come into a plank on the breath in. Going to roll over the toes and lower the knees to the floor. And exhale back into a child's pose. Elbows and forehead to the ground. Inhale, we'll let ourselves lift up so the spine be rounded. We'll come back into that tabletop position, reset the shoulders back, draw the belly in, tuck the toes underneath, and press the hips back and open up into our down dog. And from here, we'll come back into the plank, shoulders over the wrists, roll over the toes, let the knees down to the floor. Set it back down, working with the breath, inhaling up. Into our tabletop. Press the hips back and then slowly up to the sky. Come into the plank. Roll over the toes. Sit gently back down. Inhale it up. Tucking the toes. Gently back into that down dog. So this time we're going to change. I'm going to take the right knee in towards the chest and bring the foot through between the hands. So it might need a little bit of assistance from the number one hand to draw that through. You're going to bring your knee over your ankle. Come right up onto the fingertips and press out through the back heel. Now we're going to lower the back knee gently down to the floor and untuck the toes. We're going to bring hands onto the front thigh and take a slow lift on the exhale to come back up. So if you push up too quickly, you sort of compress the spine and it doesn't have a chance to sort of work its way around where it needs to be. It's so sort of involved in going where you're trying to take it to. So you want to kind of let it find its own uninhibited way of moving up. Let the hands come out to the side. Take the hands out to about the height of the shoulders and then bend the elbows. So hands are towards the sky and fingers are spread out. And then we're going to squeeze the shoulder blades together and draw the elbows towards the back of the mat. So nice cactus arms. One more breath. And then lower the hands. Ease yourself back into that lunge position. We'll tuck the toe and step back into the down dog to take it to the other side. So just press back gently. And then when you're ready, you draw your left knee in. Bring the foot through. Knee down to the ground, untuck the toes again. Again, just check your knees over your ankle. Slow lift on the exhale. Let the spine find its own place. You're looking for height. You're lifting the torso up out of the pelvis gently, continuously. Let the hands come to the side of the body and out. Again, we make those nice big cactus arms. And we squeeze the shoulder blades together. Still lifting the chest and the body out of the pelvis, pressing into the big toe on the front foot for stability. A little bit into the back shin. And then we'll let the hands down. I'm going to step back into the down dog again. And then this time we're going to take the right foot out to the side of the right hand. Just draw the knee in, take it through and out. Lower the back knee down onto the floor. Now, untucking the toes. Once you've arrived, we're going to spin the front foot out to the side a little bit. There's no real sort of exact science. Just spin it out so it feels comfortable in the hip. And then we're going to flex the foot a little bit so the toes come in towards the knee and just let the knee hang out to the side. I'm going to draw the left hand in just a little bit more so it's more underneath my shoulder and bring my right hand onto the side to lift the chest up. Now, so I'm trying to press away through the bottom hand to lift the chest and rotate it around. I'm also trying to let the hips sink down towards the floor. There's very little weight in this hand on the thigh. It's just really there to keep it out of the way and add a little bit of balance. And we'll bring the hands to the floor. We're stepping it back into the down dog. So just tucking the toes underneath. You might need to reset the hands a little bit again. And then slide the foot back into our down dog. We'll take the left leg out to the outside of the left hand, lowering the back knee. Spin the foot out till it feels comfortable. Untucking the toes on the back foot, just walking the right hand in a little bit more underneath the shoulder. Flex the foot, let the knee hang out to the side. When you feel ready, you're going to take the hand onto the thigh and open up, press into the floor. The reason we want to press down is it's very easy to just sort of sit into the shoulder and the elbow joint and the wrists and let everything collapse. It's a good way of starting to form carpal tunnel syndrome. Gives us a little bit of wear and tear on the elbow that we don't need. And the shoulder kind of gets overworked as well. It's happier if it's drawn back and the shoulder girdle is wide and set. Now we'll bring the hands back to the floor. Reset the hands to the wide width we need. Take that down dog, just temporarily. Come down onto the knees. I'm going to sit back onto the heels. I'm going to keep the toes in a position where the bootlaces are down. The toes extend away. I'm just going to roll the shoulders around a few times here. Some nice big juicy circles, getting a lot of movement into the spine as well. A little bit of tilt forwards and backwards into the pelvis as well. Roll in the opposite direction. There we go. Now, if you have a couple of bricks or blocks, just allow yourself to take those out to the front of the mat, just to give yourself a little bit more height. Now take a breath from here, bring the hands forwards into that tabletop, move into a down dog, and then we'll float into a plank. Lower the knees to the floor. I'm going to take a little breath from here. I'm going to bend the elbows back and let the chest come between the hands. The bottom stays high just for a second, and then slide the feet back so the belly comes to the floor and on top of the toes. Inhale the chest away from the ground. The toes turn in and the heels turn out slightly as the legs press down into the floor and away. And then exhale back down to the ground. Inhale up. Add a little squeeze into the shoulders, draw them to elbows towards the back of the mat. We'll take that 3 more times. Two more times. One more time. Now bring the hands down to the bottom of the ribs. Press into the floor to lift up. And take a little breath. And take the hands forwards again. I'm going to come into that down dog, so lifting the knees away from the floor. And draw the right knee into the chest and bring the foot through between the hands. I'm going to take my bricks and blocks out in front. I'll put them on a slightly higher level, a little bit wider than the shoulders. They come into warrior 3. So I'm going to push off the back toes and lean into the front knee, take it towards the toes a little bit. There's a movement through and lift the back foot away from the floor. So I want to be able to press down onto the blocks. Now, obviously, if you've got different length legs, you might be able to have the blocks closer to the ground. I'm still trying to keep those front hip bones on each side the same distance from the floor we talked about earlier. And you're going to press the back leg out to a straight leg as you can. The standing leg, you want to be careful you don't press back into the knee. You do want to push down into the floor so you get the muscles to lift and engage. You're not sitting in the joints so much. You can, if you want to, come up onto the fingertips if you feel stable enough. Draw the chest forwards a little bit as well. We've got 2 more breaths. And then to come out of that, we're going to soften the front knee and plant the back foot to the back of the mat. Bring the hands back and step back into our down dog. Take a breath. And we'll draw the left foot in and bring that through. Take a little time. Make sure you feel happy in your position. Move the blocks around a little bit if you need to adjust, taking them forwards. When you're ready, take a breath in, draw the belly in, press away from the foot to the lift up. Square the hips, straight leg. Chest actually lifts up and forwards and away from the body, which you think you sort of want to try and instinctively draw everything back and get the center of gravity over the standing leg, but that back leg, assure you, is going to be quite heavy. Toes point down towards the floor. 3 more breaths. And then we'll soften the front knee. Ease ourselves back into the lunge. Take a little breath. Step it back into our down dog. We'll walk the hands towards the toes, so make sure the feet are hip distance apart. Come into a final standing forward fold. And let ourselves relax down. Again, walk the hands forwards about a foot. Come up onto the tippy toes, bend the knees and step back down onto the haunches. And then once we're there, we just take the hands out gently, bring the bottom to the ground, and then we can let ourselves scoot along. So go and retrieve the bricks and blocks from the front of the mat towards the sort of middle back area. I'm going to take my flat block, just place that underneath the bottom, and let myself lengthen the legs out in front. I'm going to take the feet out to the side edges of the mat, so the soles of the feet want to be on the floor. So you kind of arrange that to how it feels good. I'm going to use the hands behind to lift my bottom off the floor just a little bit so I can come onto the front edge of the sitting bones. So it's easier to lean over and through the gap that I've just made. I'm going to take one hand on top of each foot and the arms on top of the knees. And then I'm going to let myself hang down into a nice roundy back. And breathe. So it's all about stretching out those long back muscles evenly through the whole back. And draw the belly in a little bit to give it a bit of support. So it should feel like a nice stretch, not overly intense, but you can feel something working. You also feel very safe. You know your body's not going to move anywhere. And then we'll let ourselves lift up. I'll take the legs out in front, sitting out tall. I'm going to draw my right heel into the groin, so knee out to the side. And because of the amount of work that I've done in the hips this afternoon, this morning rather, isn't great. Not particularly open out in the groin, so I'm going to use a block underneath there. So I can turn the long leg, the thigh up towards the sky. A little bend in the knees, hands on the shin. We're going to lift up. We're going to lift up a little bit more and then fold over. I'm going to take another breath and lift up and further forwards. And then I'm going to let myself just roll down gently. So I'm not particularly taking the hands out to reach to any point. I'm just seeing how round I can get over that front thigh. If it feels better to take the hands either side of the foot for balance reasons, you can. I'm going to try and press the bent knee down to the floor a bit whilst we're in position. So not using the hands, we're just going to try and move the muscles in that direction and see how that changes the feeling through the hips. Maybe a little bit into that front hamstring as well, which would be kind of odd. It's because you're putting extra strain through the groins. And then we'll lift up. And we'll take it to the second side. So now my body, the opposite leg, is happy to sit down to the floor. But if you need to use the bricks and blocks again, or don't need them, that's fine. And take the little bend in the knee, bring the hands onto the shins and lift up. The foot is flat. You're going to get the height in the body, you're going to lift it up a bit more. Come forwards about halfway. Then you're going to lift it up and draw it forwards a bit more. And then fold it over the thigh and let it rest. Now once you get in that comfortable position, you start to focus on the bent knee. Try and press that thigh and shin down into the floor. And then we'll use the hands to press into the ground to lift back up. We'll take it into a seated twist. So we're going to take the right foot underneath, out to the left foot over, and towards the body, right arm up. We're just going to rotate the body around. Just bring the hands down towards the floor so we get a little counter levering on the front arm. We're going to press the front hip bones forwards again to help lengthen the spine up and out. And look gently over the rear shoulder if that feels comfortable in the back of the neck. Otherwise, just letting the chin follow the heart. And then we'll rest here, come back to the center, entangling the legs. Ease ourselves into the last side. Setting ourselves up. Left hand rises, rotating around to the right this time. And then we release. Let the legs out in front again. So I'm going to come into a bridge pose, but it's going to be a supportive one. We're going to take it for a while, which is why we wanted the assortment of bricks and blocks. Now, I know that when I'm doing a restorative bridge, that when I want to be supporting my back, that just got a little bit of a bend in the bottom block. The 1 block and 2 bricks is the right height for my spine, but you might need to experiment a little bit, and you can certainly have it down as low as 1 block if that feels good. So once you've got your blocks in the right position, and if you want to, you can put some extra layers on. I think I'm going to do that myself because my feet are getting cold. There we go. And I think I put my top on as well. So as you lie down, just make sure that your sort of clothing isn't binding into your lower back. And keep the knees high. And you're going to lift the hips gently off the ground. So just going to roll them up. So as you're experimenting, you might want to take 1 block at a time and lift up gently. I'm going to bring the whole shooting match underneath. Now it's important that the blocks are safe and stable, so make sure they're all connected nicely on top of each other, not on the edges. And that the other thing is that you're resting on the pelvis, not actually on the spine. And we're going to let the hands come out to the side. Once you're in position. Now there's 2 or 3 options that we can work with. We can allow ourselves to just take the feet as wider than the mat maybe, or as wide as the mat, and let the knees roll in just a little touch and see how that feels. And then we could stay here for a couple of minutes, just letting the spine get used to that. And then we could take the feet out to the corner edges of the mat very gently. We would experiment with 1 leg at a time. Now you might find that if you're on multiple bricks and blocks, that when you take the legs out, that's just a little bit too much for your spine. It's endeavoring to get that hip flexor to straight out a little bit more. It does put some compression into your lower back. So you might need to take a brick or a block out to get the legs out. Now, there's nothing wrong with staying here for the next 4 minutes with feet wide and the knees rocking in a little bit. It's going to be really a question of seeing how your back feels today. And gradually, with the support of the block, if you've settled into how many blocks you're using, you'll start to feel the lower abdominal set releasing. And when that happens, then the lower back muscles can release a little bit as well. The companion muscles working together. So once you start to relax one, you can kind of let the other one turn off a little bit, which is what we're looking for. Try and let those shoulders relax, keep a soft jaw, eyes closed. Now, if you feel that you want to try taking a foot at a time, I would suggest using your toes to sort of crawl the foot out and then slide the heel out gently and see how that feels. So you want to keep the foot in contact with the ground the whole time as you do this. And if it feels okay on one side, then you can do the same on the opposite side. If there's any sense of heat or pinching, or it feels uncomfortable, you're not able to relax, then you simply slowly move yourself back out again. As I said before, you might find that the secret is to bring yourself down a block or two. So you're going to start to draw those heels back in if they were lengthened out in the first place. Keep the feet nice and wide, and then we're going to draw the abdominal muscles back in. So we're going to start to draw them in towards the spine and start to wake it up a little bit, and then press into the feet a little bit, just enough to get a fraction of a lift so you can take a block out at a time. Lower yourself down, find the safety of the block. Oh, yeah, I remember what that feels like. Take a breath here. A little press, draw the belly in, feet into the floor, we lift again. Ease our way down. Take a breath in. And again, we just draw the belly in a little bit, get a tiny little lift, take the last block out. We're going to come into our final Shavasana position. So I like to use the block underneath the back of the head. Wrap my sweatshirt around, get myself nice and cozy, and then just slowly lengthen the heel again at a time out to the corner edges, so keeping the legs in contact. And then letting the hands by the side of the body. You should feel like you've got a very long, flat spine. And we're trying to let go of any areas of tension that we find in the body. So starting to scan around. And it might be obvious to start in the spine and then work down the legs, and then from the spine back up into the shoulders. And using the pelvis as a center point or the solar plexus to just discover if you are indeed holding on where you weren't conscious. We'll begin to wriggle the toes and the fingers. Get a little bit of movement into the wrists and the ankles. Breathe a little deeper. Take a bit of a stretch. Whatever that looks like. And then draw a heel at a time in towards your bottom. And then let the knees come in one leg at a time. You can give yourself a hug, or you can just rock those hips around a little bit. In some tiny circles with the knees in the air. Just getting a little bit of movement into a lot of places in the spine. And finally, we're going to roll on to our right side. And allow ourselves to stay in that fetal position. Mostly tucked up and relaxing down to the floor. And then keeping it soft and gentle, press into the floor to lift up. So you stay in that happy blissed state that we managed to get ourselves in. Sitting up tall, you can just roll the shoulders around a little bit and then bring the hands in towards your heart. Taking a breath in. Going to close the eyes as we begin to exhale, let the chin drop, let the belly draw in. See our practice as we bow down to the floor. Inhaling up, opening the eyes. Namaste. Have a lovely day.